Have you ever wanted to enter that old abandoned house down the road? The house you drive by every day. The house that's cracked and falling apart and is just begging to be explored. What a thrill, right? It's gonna be a good time, right? Wrong. Join me as I share with you 5 true abandoned house horror stories. I broke into an abandoned house in my hometown. The place had been empty for as long as I can remember. It stands on a massive property on the side of a busy road, and there is a big lake behind the house. I went in broad daylight. The property and hedges are large enough that I wasn't immediately visible from the road. I broke in through a back window. The majority of the house was dark. Most of the windows and French doors had been boarded up. The house was really creaky, like an old ship. There was a lot of really ugly late 60s and early 70s furniture. Everything was gold or brown or orange. I found some mail in a front room, all dated around August 1985, so I figured that's when the former owners must have left, for whatever reason. In another room, I found kids' toys, but they didn't look old. They looked like someone had just been playing with them recently. In the kitchen, I found some empty cans of beans that also looked relatively new, and in the pantry, there were urine-soaked sofa cushions someone had been using as a bed. This is when I started to get freaked out, because obviously, someone had been there somewhat recently, but they didn't seem to be there at that time. I went up to the second floor. The floor of the upstairs hallway was so warped that it was curved in a rainbow shape and was hard to walk down. In the last bedroom at the end of the hall, I found a room full of birthday cards. I mean, hundreds of birthday cards. They all, in some way or another, were wishing someone named Eric a happy birthday. Only they were all written by the same hand. Most seemed to have been written with the same pen. Finally, I went up to the 3rd floor. The hallway was so warped, I had to brace myself against the wall. I had barely started when I heard movement from a bedroom a little ways down. It sounded like slapping and dragging. I stood as quietly as possible until a pair of filthy hands came out of the doorway and a man began to pull himself across the threshold into the hall. He wasn't groaning. I can't think of a word, but it was far more aggressive than groaning. I bolted, ran all the way down the stairs and back out the window I came in. I looked back, but didn't see anyone following me. This happened in Suffolk County, Long Island, back in June 2009. The house has since been torn down, and the lot remains empty. I went into an abandoned old house with my buddies a while back. There were 4 of us. The house was pretty big, and honestly, we were looking for valuables. We all went inside and noticed there was nothing worth anything. We had all been drinking, so we were acting dumb, making lots of noise. 3 of us went upstairs and walked into a room up there. There was airplane models on the floor, and most of them were broken. I picked up one and was looking at it. I guess I was the only one interested because my buddies left and went downstairs again. I could hear them talking and laughing, and then the door slammed shut behind me. This kinda scared me, and I got annoyed. I tried opening it, but it wouldn't. I thought it must be jammed, but then I saw the doorknob wasn't moving. It was locked. I started bashing it, telling them to open the damn door, but they didn't. I started to get pissed off, and I slammed my body into it. It crashed open, and I saw that the lock on the other side had a key in it. I pulled it out and went downstairs. My buddies were all in the kitchen next to the door we came in at. I interrupted them and asked them who locked me inside the room. They all laughed and denied it. I wasn't having fun anymore, and they told me for sure it wasn't any of them. I told them somebody did lock me in there, and we got spooked and left. No idea what that was all about, but somebody locked me in that damn room upstairs. I still think about it sometimes, and it gives me the creeps. What if somebody else was in that house? I've asked them so many times, even when they were sober, and they have all said that they swear they didn't do it, and they had never seen that key before. I'm in my 30s now, and so is my best friend Richard. We've been friends a long time. We met when we were 13. We both lived in the country, and the street we lived on was very long, about 2 miles all the way down. We both lived near the end of the road, across the street from one another. Living out there, we had so much freedom. We explored a lot, rode our bikes everywhere, and sometimes got into trouble. Well, one day, we decided to go exploring again, but this time, we wanted to check out the abandoned house that was at the very end of the street. We had seen it several times, but the gate was all chained up in front of it, and there were very long, overgrown weeds surrounding the entire property. We brought a backpack with ridiculous things packed that we wouldn't need, like batteries, rope, and walkie-talkies. We were standing in front of the house, and we were waiting until the sun started to set, so we couldn't be seen very easily once we hopped the fence. Man, how I wish we would have just hopped that fence during daylight. How I wish even more that we never did it at all. Richard was the one that usually led the two of us. It never bothered me because he seemed smart for his age. He was confident, and he was 6 months older than me. At the right moment, he said it was time to hop the fence, and after we did, I remember looking at my hands, and there was rust on them. The metal fence was old, very old. We walked through the weeds, and when we got up to the house, we both stopped, and I could tell Richard had changed his mind, but didn't want to admit it. The house was creepy from the road, but up close, this was not an inviting place. Boards were up on all the windows, and the door had wooden planks nailed across it. We walked around the house to the back, and to our surprise, when we got there, we saw a large hole in a window, and it was a very easy entrance. The other windows and the back door were completely boarded up, so it felt like it was meant to be. The sun was almost completely set at around this time, and I remember feeling cool, adventurous, and daring going inside this house. Richard went in first, and I followed close behind him. The house was a 2-story, and Richard immediately, but slowly, made his way down the hall and over to the front of the house where the stairs were. Richard unzipped the backpack I was wearing and grabbed the walkie-talkies and told me to cover the first floor while he went upstairs. This idea obviously made me feel nervous, but further heightened the feeling of being cool and daring, so I agreed. I realize now that there was no point of doing this other than to feel like special forces in the military or something like that, but we were 13. Richard went upstairs, and I continued walking around into what I thought used to be the dining room. There was a long table with newspapers all over it. I took off my backpack to get my flashlight, and I realized Richard forgot to bring his upstairs. I shined the light on the papers and saw the date was April 13th, 1995. It was only a week old. I felt shivers go up my neck as I realized somebody had been in there very recently and might have still been in there with us. I started walking back over to the stairs when from the shadows behind me, I heard, "You really need to leave," accompanied with a laugh. Whoever had just said it was a woman, and her voice was scratchy, like she had smoked cigarettes for years. Her laugh was terrifying. I looked into her direction but couldn't see her, and I managed to say back, "Okay, we're leaving right now, sorry." I looked up at the staircase and didn't see Richard. The woman suddenly appeared next to me and whispered to me, "Get out of here." I almost fainted and didn't hesitate. I ran back down the hallway and out the hole in the back of the house. It was dark now, and I thought for sure my best friend was going to be murdered at any moment, and I would hear him scream. But I heard nothing. I stood out there behind a tree and waited. I must have waited 10 minutes before I couldn't take it anymore. I crept quietly back over to the hole, and when I got to it, I whispered as loudly as I could, "Richard." Just as I did that, I heard someone start pounding the floorboards towards where I was. I could see their outline coming down the hall, and it wasn't Richard. I ran away as fast as I could toward the front fence, and when I got there, I hopped it so fast that I cut my hand. I ran down the road and started to cry. I stopped to breathe for a second, but then continued running to my house. I exploded through my front door and told my uncle, who I lived with, what had happened. He insisted that I calm down, and we got in his truck and drove down to the house. We tried our best to see something, anything, but we couldn't. It was too dark, and my uncle said he wasn't going over that fence because it was private property. I was bawling at this point and kept saying my friend was still inside and he's probably dead. My uncle eventually got upset and told me to calm down again. He agreed to call the police, and 2 police officers drove out there some time later. I was told I couldn't watch them go over the fence, and that my uncle and I needed to go back into our house. I sat on the living room couch, trying to explain everything as clearly as I could, and shortly after we got home, the police knocked on our door. They told us that they didn't find anything, and that Richard probably went home. I didn't fall asleep that night until very early in the morning, and at some point in the afternoon, my uncle woke me up on the couch and told me Richard was fine and that he was there to see me. I was so amazed and happy, so relieved to see him. He was actually all smiles and couldn't wait to tell me what happened. He told me he had heard the woman downstairs and also heard another person upstairs where he was in one of the bedrooms. He hid in the closet in the room he was in and stayed there for a very long time. He said it must have been hours. This is the part that still gives me the chills, though. He said when the police came to the house, they went through the hole and the two people that were in the house went to the room he was in and sat in the corner right next to him, right next to the closet. He also said that the closet was empty, and if they had opened it, they would have easily seen him. I asked him how he got out, and he said he heard them say they were leaving and going to some creek. After he was sure they had gone, he climbed out of the closet and ran home. I'm from Pennsylvania, and most of you from the area know about the whole abandoned turnpike. If you don't know or can't relate, the Pennsylvania Abandoned Turnpike is a stretch of road that was meant to be part of the turnpike in Pennsylvania, but was abandoned in the 1960s when it was basically bypassed by I-70. Well, a couple buddies and I, accompanied by our ladies at the time, took a road trip up to the old Laurel Hill Tunnel and decided to check it out. So we park off a woodland trail and hike what feels like 2 miles at a 90-degree angle up to the actual abandoned work site. Now, it's like 2 a.m. at this point, so we're just getting into the fun. We start walking the 13-mile stretch of road and come to one of the overpass tunnels that had what looked like a small house or a heating and AC building attached to it. This shit is old as hell too. It's sheet metal and green, like your grandpa's tool shed out back. So to get inside of this, there's a stairwell to the side that is brick and has an old school iron staircase that looks like a fire escape. So we start to climb up this stairwell, and all of a sudden, a chair comes flying down the stairs at us and crashed at the level right above us. It terrified the shit out of us. The scariest part about the whole thing, though, was that the ladies of ours who didn't climb the stairs with us and waited at the bottom let out the most blood-curdling screams. Their screams not only echoed through the stairwell, but they told us that they screamed because they were hit with a blast of wind that had no business being there. So needless to say, we never went there again. My friends and I love to find abandoned houses and go take pictures before they get torn down. I found a good one, a little old farmhouse, and brought 3 friends back there. There was a huge yard and barn, and we walked around a bunch, making noise. We went in the house and took a ton of pictures. The wallpaper was amazing. We poked around, went downstairs, and then upstairs, to the kitchen, everywhere. It was 3 stories, and we eventually made our way up to the attic. It had little window alcoves. The room was empty, except for a clean popcorn bowl in the corner, which we thought was very weird. There was a little door in the wall that was propped open. We had been in the house for probably 15 minutes at this point, being super noisy. 2 of my friends walked over to the door to check it out, and then started whispering, "Feet, feet, feet," and we all booked it down the stairs that were falling through to the main floor. I was in the back and didn't have any idea what was going on. Turns out, there was someone laying in the crawl space. They didn't move at all when we were being noisy in the house, or when we were in the room with them. Their feet were just sticking out of the door. We ran the hell out of there and stood in the street for a long time to see if anyone came to the attic window. No one ever did. We did